Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, Your Excellency, Dr. Shri Anwar Ibrahim, my greetings to you and my congratulations not to you but to the people of Malaysia who have chosen you as their Prime Minister. May you serve them well, which I'm sure you will do, and may all the obstacles upon your path be removed by God, and may you be a unifying force for this very dear and important part of the Islamic world, which is playing a role really above and beyond its size and population as far as the Islamic world as a whole is concerned. As also my salams to government officials, academics, and students who are present. I've been asked to say a few words on the occasion of the celebration of the life work and activities of Dr. Osman Bakar. And of course, I'm very glad to do so. I'm asked to say a few words about the question of Islam and Islamic civilization and why it still matters. But let me start with Dr. Bakar himself, and it will lead me to that. Malaysia is fortunate to have had an intellectual figure like him. I have known him for 40-some years, a long, long time. When I came into exile in America after the Iranian Revolution, I was teaching at Temple University early in the 80s. He became my student there as a PhD student, studied several years with me, did his doctoral thesis with me, and I've been in close association with him ever since, and have worked on many projects with him. He developed very rapidly, coming from a background in mathematics with intense interest in Islamic studies, developed very rapidly into a very fine scholar. He wrote his PhD thesis on the classification of the sciences in Islam under my care, which is still a classical book, and a very, very precious piece of scholarship. And he later on developed interest in relation between Islam and Confucianism, considering the fact that Malaysia is really the natural link between the Confucian Chinese world and the Islamic world, because not only of its location, but the structure of its population. The work is done is a very, very important one. And now there are other people in the Islamic world working on the subject, but he's been among the foremost to do so. He turned his attention to introducing the total tradition of Islamic philosophy into the Malay world, especially later Islamic thought, which had not been known to Malay scholars. And he at the same time brought out the significance of what we might call civilizational studies, which are in a sense a new field developing in which consideration is made not of linguistic units or ethnic units, but of civilizations as basis for study. And in the Islamic world, he's a pioneer in that subject. In fact, he is, along with Professor Latas, perhaps the two most important intellectual figures of Malaysia who have put Malaysia, you might say, on the map intellectually as far as the Islamic world is concerned. Traditionally and historically, the central area of the Islamic world between, let's say, what is today Pakistan, or up to Delhi, to Cairo, in the east, to Cairo in the west, and including, of course, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and so forth in the middle, where the lands were the most important intellectual, philosophical, theological ideas were developed, and then they extended to the two limbs, to the two sides of the Islamic world, and except for the short period of Andalusian philosophy and intellectual activity science that took place in Iberia and Spain, practically all of the important intellectual figures of Islam came from this middle area. And what was done in those areas outside did not flow back into the center. The flow was always from the center outward. With the appearance of Dr. Atas and Dr. Bakar and a few other Malaysian scholars and now Indonesian scholars, for the first time Southeast Asia is put on the map, you might say, and the rest of the Islamic world has become cognizant of its intellectual activities and its intellectual importance. Anyway, I wish him a long life of service to the cause of truth, to the cause of Islamic culture, Islamic thought, and I want to thank Your Excellency for supporting, in fact, important intellectual and religious and philosophical currents and figures in Malaysia. We Muslims, unfortunately, have a bad habit of oftentimes waiting until somebody dies in order to appreciate them. It's much better to do so when they're alive. And what you're doing now sets an example, really, for the rest of the Islamic world in many ways. Now, in the few minutes that are left to me, I was supposed to talk about why the study of Islamic subjects and civilization still matters. Not only does it still matter, it matters much more than it did before. When colonialism came to parts of the Islamic world, including the Malay world, of course, the colonialists tried first to dilute the Malay population. They tried to belittle Islamic teachings. The universities that were created were really Western style, and Islamic subjects were not taught that seriously, and so forth and so on. All of these that we see throughout the colonial period. And everybody predicted that, especially Western Orientalists, that Islam would sort of dwindle or wither away and disappear in the 20th century. Books of people like Zwemer written in the early 20th century, which predicts that. But of course, the reverse took place not only for Islam, but for other religions. There's been a major revival of religious interest since the second half of the 20th century, and especially in Islam, and to some extent Hinduism and Buddhism and other religions, but especially Islam. And now you have it in Christian fundamentalism in the United States itself. But as far as the Islamic world is concerned, Islam was never truncated or eclipsed to need to be revived. What we need is to make its treasures better known in a contemporary language. Islam has to look upon the West from the point of view of Islam, and not to look upon itself from the point of view of the West. I've said this for decades. If a human being does that, they say he's mentally ill, has schizophrenia, and they take him to asylum. We cannot be taken to asylum as a civilization. In the same way that the West looks upon the Islamic world from its own point of view, we have to look upon the Western world from our point of view. And Dr. Osman Bakar and a few other scholars, some of whom I've had the pleasure of teaching myself, and others whom I've known in various ways, and some whom I do not know, but I've read their writings, are pioneers in what I've been preaching for and writing about for decades and decades. That is, to provide an Islamic vision of global civilizations, especially Western civilizations, but from the Islamic point of view, not from the Western point of view. The day when we would take books from English and French and German about Islamic philosophy, translate it into our local languages and teach it in our universities are over. We know how writing our own books more and more, not that it's completely done, but done to some extent. And we must come to understand these subjects from our own point of view. And one of the most important, which involves, in fact, the work of Dr. Bakar, is the question of science. Science is nonsense. Science is related to civilization. It's related to the worldview. When the West took over Islamic science in the Middle Ages, it did not adopt the Islamic worldview. It integrated Islamic sciences into the Christian worldview of its own. We have not been able to do that in reverse in the 19th and 20th century. And Dr. Bakar and others have been really pioneers in trying to present Islamic science and learning from the point of view of Islam and provide the means of looking at modern science from our own point of view. I've trained many students over these decades. Some of them are world famous philosophers, writers, teachers, and so forth. And I'm proud to say that Dr. Bakar is one of my best, and in this particular field has been really outstanding in pursuing in the Malay world an issue which is not bound to the Malay world alone, but which is a critical, vital issue to the whole of the Islamic world. I pray, Mr. Prime Minister, for your health, for that of your country, and for Dr. Bakar, and I hope that inshallah, under your guidance, scholars such as he will be appreciated while they're alive, and they will give courage to others to pursue the fields of scholarship and dedicate themselves to knowledge and the truth. Assalamu alaikum.